News headlines at the top of the hour. Zimbabwe remains on the edge. President Robert Mugabe is confined to his home as the military takes control of key installations in the country. Several Mugabe aides were arrested, including the finance minister. President Jacob Zuma sends a special envoy to deal with the Zimbabwean situation. Zuma says any unconstitutional changes of government is condemned as that it would be contrary to both the SADC and the African Union positions. Businessman AJ Gupta writes to the Parliamentary Committee on Public Enterprises, refuting allegations made by suspended Eskom legal officer Suzanne Daniels. AJ Gupta provides evidence showing he was not in South Africa on the date of the alleged meeting. The ANC Women's League in Mpumalanga endorses Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma for the top job. Premier David Mabuza gets the nod to be her deputy.
France.
And a setback for South Africa as France is announced as the host nation for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Welcome back and thanks again for staying with ANN7 Prime. Our top story this hour, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal has taken Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe to task over the release of the province branch meeting numbers, which showed serious discrepancies. The KZN says figures that Mantashe released at the media briefing did not include the latest tally. They say this paints a wrong picture for the province. ANN7 reporter Patti Samfuyo has more.
The last time I've seen so many...
The ANC in KwaZulu-Natal is not happy with the figures released by the ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe for its province. Mantashe announced at a media briefing on Tuesday that only 40.8% of branches in KwaZulu-Natal have convened their BGMs. This, they say, is not true.
The information at his disposal, which he used to quantify the progress we've made in KZN, was of that other week. When we saw it, the first step we undertook was for the Provincial Secretary to write a letter to the Secretary General.
ANC Secretary-General Gwede Mantashe gave an update on the progress made regarding the convergence of the party's branch general meetings across the country.
The tribal province of the Eastern Cape is, as of yesterday, was at 56% of the BGMs. That's what it was. The Free State was at 75.9%. Of the BGMs. Gauteng was at 76% of the BGMs. KZN was at 40.8% of the BGMs. Mpumalanga was at 95.7%. Limpopo was at 73.8%. Northern Cape was at 93.9%. Northwest was at 54.3%. And Western Cape was at 66.3%.
There are at least 806 ANC branches which are in good standing in KwaZulu-Natal. The KwaZulu-Natal PEC says about 700 of these branches have convened their general meetings.
We are at 78%, 78.5% of branches that qualified, which have convened successful BGM. So there is no doubt in our minds that we were ready and prepared to take all our delegates to the National Conference of the ANC.
Even though the deadline for the last sitting of the BGMs is today, Mantashe said they will still be accepting results until Sunday the 19th. This, he said, is to allow sufficient time for appeals, which must be lodged within 48 hours of the disputed BGM. Out of the 30 disputes that have been received here in KwaZulu-Natal, Mtumseni Ntuli says they've gone through at least 60% of those, and they're quite confident that they will meet the deadline come Sunday. But he says there is only one branch in Okahlamba which they might have to reconvene the BGM, but they're still waiting for one piece of information for them to confirm this information. For ANN7, I'm Patti Sampuyo in Durban.
And joining us in studio are Dylan Chabeling, Transform RSA President, Sfiso Mahlango, Group Political Editor, Professor Andre Duvanage, a political analyst via Skype, and Dumiseni Ntuli, KwaZulu-Natal ANC Provincial Spokesperson, and Levin Doe, political analyst on the phone line. Good evening to all our guests, and thanks so much for joining us. Now, these discrepancies that emerge now after the branch general meetings, what can we read out of it, especially if the KZN PEC argues that the SG, in fact, inflated these numbers?
Good evening, Cindy, and good evening to the viewers of ANN7. I think the delegation or the voters, the provincial team, the branches in KZN have a substantial point. How do you trust a Secretary General who is on the slate as a chairman of a coming, or what he hopes would be a coming administration in the ANC? He knows he's secured a seat in Ramaphosa's slate at Luthuli House, should this twist in Ramaphosa's favor. So I think the comrades have a valid point to say, how do we trust the authenticity, the objectivity of Comrade Gwede Mantashe? And so it becomes a valid point to them to say, how do we know that you are not inflating the results? So it really looks like CR17 is ahead of NDZ, and then you can win all the branches. Because we have seen you on Twitter saying that if President Jacob Zuma doesn't hand over to Cyril Ramaphosa, there's going to be a crisis in the ANC and a crisis in the country. We have heard you multiple times at public podiums, slanting or slating NDZ, and saying there should be a leader, there should be a president that follows in this country in terms of tradition, that the ANC has always observed tradition, that the deputy president becomes the president. And for that matter, he's been lobbying for Cyril. So why would NDZ supporters and people who are not even NDZ supporters, general ANC members, trust someone like that? If you sound like you are doing the lobbying, but you are in a sensitive position and a strategic position like that of the Secretary General of the ANC, you have the power to do anything, because all the nominations end up at one place, in the office of the Secretary General. I think the people have a concern, and in my view, it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, because if you take a look at what happened with the other elective conferences provincially, the court cases that the ANC has meted against itself, so to speak, that this could be the emergence of a crisis going forward if the whole numbers issue is not dealt with.
Good evening, Cindy, and good evening to the viewers. It's very concerning. Transform RSA is one of the strongest stakeholders and supporters towards the ANC December elective and policy conference. And we're very quite concerned to start seeing the developments within the structures, particularly at the top leadership level, where the top six, which is now represented by the Secretary General of the ANC, starts making pronouncements that might actually start giving an impression that the numbers within the ongoing programs as well as engagement towards the National Policy Conference is already predetermined and inflated in order to give an impression that there is already a leading candidate. This is an ongoing process and must be allowed to be ongoing. And as a result, I think at this stage, the ANC should actually allow itself time between its own top six decision-making process to remove itself from actually start giving out an impression. If you recall, during the June and July National Policy Conference, there was a big mistake which was made, whereby there was an announcement that actually stated very clearly by John H. Tenze, who said that according to numbers, which were actually a wrong impression of what really took place, that there was already a decision that white monopoly capital was not an adopted, position within the National Policy Conference. So now you're having another emergence of an issue that might actually precipitate a crisis. These are not necessary crises when you're leading towards a very important, monumental conference which leads to the December. The inflation of numbers should be discouraged right now. The issues must be raised internally, and some of the statements coming out of the ANC, we would strongly recommend that they start vetting them out before they become public knowledge, because you have a movement that will be actually represented by over 5,000 people who would be taking votes and interest, and there will be debates. But to start now actually indicating publicly as now the central head as well as decision-making power of the ANC to say this is what is going to happen or this is who is leading in the race right now, it's quite very dangerous. We do not want to, particularly after the announcement that Secretary General Gwede Mantashe is actually one of the slate that has already been announced in the incoming presidential race. So these issues must be dealt with very cautiously and carefully. And I would assume that at this stage, Mantashe, as the Secretary General, must start removing himself from actually making any pronouncement that will actually jeopardize the process towards the election.
Let's just get a voice from Dumiseni Ntuli, KZN ANC Provincial spokesperson. Mr. Ntuli, thanks so much for your time. Are you saying that in misrepresenting the figures to be lower than the required delegation is to delegitimize the process of the elective conference in December?
Well, good evening, Cindy, as well as the fellow participants in the discussion and viewers at home. I think first and foremost, it was and remains our considered view as the leadership of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal that it was not going to be appropriate to sustain in the public domain and internally in the organization figures that did not reflect the actuality of our situation. We knew that the SG could not have acted maliciously in the numbers. What we think has happened is that the interaction between his office and our Provincial Secretary's office was not, did not get the latest statistics and information in terms of the BGMs that were held at the time of the press conference. That is why we then said, in order to avoid a possibility for suspicions on Monday next week when we say we've covered the whole 100% of our branches, and people will start saying, but how was it possible that in less than 7 days you attained 60%, while in more than 45 days we were only able to attain 40%. But we're also worried that it might signal wrongly to society that we have troubles, we have difficulties, we're unable to convene successful PGMs, and our view was that we do not want a wrong and incorrect narrative to dominate the national discourse, which is guided by the information that was not accurate. And that's why we thought we must correct it once and for all.
All right, please stay on the line, Mr. Ntuli. Professor Andre Duvenage, a political analyst, joins us via Skype. Do you think that there is more to this than what Mr. Ntuli is portraying, that there could potentially have been miscommunication or information lost in transit, and therefore the SG was not speaking on the same page as the province?
Cindy, yes, that may be the case, but I think the problem is a lot more than only a communication problem. It's a problem about the integrity of the organization, because we have senior ANC members questioning the integrity of the leadership within the organization. And clearly, as an analyst, I also have a number of problems with the figures, thinking that Northwest has more branches than Gauteng, that Mpumalanga suddenly becomes the second biggest ANC province in the country. I know there are big problems in KZN, as is the case in some other provinces. But for me, it's about the integrity of the organization. There should be structures and processes. You need to audit branch numbers, and there should be auditing processes. It's not all about the Secretary General and his interpretation. It should be about process and structure. And my question is, where's the structure? Where's the process? Where's the auditing of these branches? There we should check if the figures are accurate.
All right, Mr. Ntuli, just in terms of the glorious 105-year-old organization, by now it should be a seamless exercise in how you vet your delegates, the numbers, and how the voting process is done. Why is it that seemingly the processes are either archaic or there's something very problematic in how the voting is done?
Well, it's not necessarily something that is unusual in a democratic organization where there is a contestation of ideas, both in terms of the policy orientation and the caliber and quality of leadership to lead that revolution after the national conference. So it's inevitable that in the context of ideas, there will also be differences about the choice of leadership, which finds expression and manifests itself in various ways in the different branch general meetings. But I can tell you that in all our branches that have taken place, we haven't had any physical assault of ANC members against other ANC members. There have been differences. In some instances, we have had to be assisted by the law enforcement agencies to ensure that there wasn't a possibility for physical physical fights between our members. But in many branches, I think 95% of branches that have said, the debate and discussions have been very comradely, very robust, very honest, and everybody have accepted that we have to contend with the fact that there are differences in some instances, and the will of the majority must prevail.
All right, just stay on the line, please. As we saw, the organizational renewal, especially when you deal with reputational issues internally where there has been factions, infighting, again, the litigation in the party itself. What Professor Duvenage is saying is that it's an overarching problem, generally, of how the organization is perceived, both internally and externally.
And the interesting thing here is that the organizational report and the political report must both be given by the Secretary General. I think many South Africans don't understand the sensitivity behind the office of the Secretary General. He is the last secretary of the ANC, the highest secretary in the ANC, which means even branch nominations come up to him. That individual has the ability to influence voting in the branches. He has the ability to extend the period in which branch nominations can be done. He has the expertise, which branch is leading, the number of branches and the nomination process. So an individual that is key in that has an oversight to how delegates are most likely to vote, which means he's got a sort of a forehand understanding of how things are likely to go down on the 22nd of December. And I think, that's a very strategic and very dangerous position to be in. The organization is challenged, but it's challenged primarily because the people who are forerunning are also people who are in the party right now. So they cannot get rid of factions because people are already in a post-December situation. I don't know if you've ever been told that on such and such a date you're going to get a lot of money. And then, being on your bed, you start calculating, when I get this money, I'll buy this and I'll do this and I do this. So people are already in a post-December situation. And this is the case with even Secretary General Mantashe, because he's got a promise and an affirmation from the Deputy President to say you're going to be chairman, the second most powerful position in the organization. And I think for that reason, people are perplexed. So what is happening in the ANC is not unusual. There have been attacks in the past. In the days of Oliver Tambo, they had to remove people from the party. There was a point where so many factions existed in the ANC. They had to go and pray and have a consensus in Mozambique. There was a period in the party where divisions ruled, to which they needed the Morogoro anointing in Tanzania. So this isn't new. However, there's a new dynamic in this. It means that the 7 contenders who are in this race each have a segment, each have a following. They all have a slate, and all of them destroy the party little by little, because who will unite the party if there's 7 people fighting for the presidency? This means that in the top 6, more than 4 of them want to be president. How are they expected to sit in one and agree and vote together? Because the 5 people in the top 6 all want to be president, with the exception of Ms. Jessie Duarte. So how do they agree and vote together? Because essentially each and everyone in that top 6 will not vote for the ANC, but will vote for their future and what they consider the future of their children, the future of their bonds, and the future of their financial life. Yeah. It's a very difficult situation.
Adil, how serious should we be taking this? Already the confusion or the question around the tally of the delegates in the BGMs generally, and what kind of uncertainty does that create for the elective conference in December?
Look, it actually feeds back to some of the views that are actually circulating, that most of the results by December, they would have already been rigged, which is not really a view. People are still going to go to the conference, and at the conference, delegates are going to be given the opportunity to start voting for the candidate of their own choice. But where you start finding leadership now meddling and actually adjusting and overinflating numbers in order to show a particular interested party within the party that is going to be leading, it's actually quite wrong, because we want a conference that will be peaceful, as the ANC has done over the years and has indicated with its strong leadership that they are geared and are capable to lead. But when you start seeing fractures like this, it's quite interesting and quite concerning for us that are sitting out as civil society, as well as stakeholders that are interested in the outcome of this process, to make sure that South Africa goes forward, being ruled by the current ANC and the leadership in process. But to see these developments happening, and you see individuals starting to take personal interest in matters that should not actually be affecting them, I agree fully with Professor Andre when he says that there should be an independent structure within the movement that speaks on an independent basis, that is actually just there for one particular reason, that is to audit, and that is to make sure that processes leading towards the National Policy Conference is actually thorough, and any pronouncement that is made out of proper authority, not made by individuals who already are having a vested interest in the outcome in order to influence what could possibly be the emerging position. At this stage, the ANC needs to make sure that it has all of these necessary structures. It is a 107 years old movement. By now, we should already be seeing that kind of accountability, transparency, and honest reporting on issues coming out and actually starting to display, so that it concretizes the movement's strength and integrity going forward. Transform RSA is very interested in a successful delivery of the December conference.
Okay, Professor Andre Duvenage, just in terms of how the ANC would have to mitigate the fallout, especially from the losing factions, when there's already a question around the numbers or the authenticity thereof.
Cindy, I'm very much concerned about the ANC as an organization's ability to deliver a legitimate result. At the moment, we have seen such a number of conflicts in the build-up to the National Conference. The only possible exception, and there's also a court case, is the Northern Cape, but in other areas, there are huge
Professor Duvenage?
Conference. It is going to be extremely difficult to get a result that is binding on both the winners and the losers. And that is going to be the big test for the ANC. Can it as an organization survive the conference and still be a unity that can work towards the 2019 election? That is the big and the main challenge.
Okay, Mr. Ntuli, just your response to that you have your work cut out for you, and it's much more ominous than what we may portray it to be, and especially when there's no unity being displayed at the moment.
Well, of course, there are challenges that the ANC is facing, but I believe that, well, as a province, we are ready to have all our delegates prepared, both in terms of the policies for discussions and the leadership choice that must be made at the National Conference of the ANC. There is no doubt in our minds that this is one of the conference that seems to be hotly contested between mainly the current Deputy President of the ANC as well as a member of the National Executive Committee, Comrade Dlamini Zuma, Dlamini Zuma. So I think we have gone through such moments in the past where there was fierce contestation of leadership, and I think we would also go to the National Conference in December and without any difficulty have our branches who are speaking already now very loud and clear about the choice they want to make, about what they believe should be the leadership of the ANC when the conference is closed on December 20 this year.
Mr. Mahlangu, in your view, can the ANC still ride on its ability to self-correct, considering its pedigree and its existence, the caliber of leadership through its ranks? Can it still ride on that?
I think it can ride on its caliber and pedigree and look at its past and sort of attempt to redefine itself when we want to talk about organizational renewal, which was a document in the discussion of the ANC's policy proposal. I think that can work. The bigger challenge is the court sittings. The results will probably be attempted, with a court ruling. The loser will cry foul and say there's been troubles at the branch general meetings. I think what is happening now is that there's a developing group that's trying to incite trouble so that when they do lose, they've got something to raise their hands about in a post-December situation. And that's very, very ugly. So people want to win, but they're citing to level some allegations when they don't win. And I think this is what the top six must be concerned with. But like I said before, when you have a top six or a top five or a top four where people are just looking after themselves no one collectively saying, let's protect the ANC. Ms. Balekambete is considering her future in the presidency. Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, Mr. Gwede Mantashe, and I think it makes a difficult procession. The only outsider at this point might be Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who's just come back from the AU and just, reaffirmed herself to Parliament. She doesn't have the state vehicles to run a campaign like everyone is doing. She was not on the state salary like everyone else was. And I think the campaign route was a bit difficult for her. And perhaps that's why they integrated her back into Parliament. But everyone is self-conscious at this point, considering themselves and not the movement. Yeah. So I think there is a likely split in a post-December situation, because if the winner takes all, which is what will happen in December, the loser will contest, because there are individuals, I think, in the party who say, if we cannot have the cake, then no one can have it.
Yeah, very quickly, Adele, is the ANC in crisis, just as a part of this exercise or question around the numbers so far?
In terms of inflation of numbers, definitely there is a crisis, because what is the intention behind the inflation of those numbers? But in terms of the movement, I don't think the ANC currently has a crisis. The only crisis that will emerge is when there is no agreement as to who now, if there is the losing party, who and how the losing party will be actually accommodated into the existing leadership structure going forward. But that said, it must always be put in mind that at the end of the conference, there was an agreement that unity should be the overriding. Policy is the most important thing that we're interested out of the outcome, not necessarily the candidate. Policy that will emerge out of the ANC conference is very important. And before I just wrap up, I must just say thank you to Sfiso for actually bringing us some of the most amazing interviews that he's been doing over the last 2 weeks, which has been really a marathon interview. You've done very well. Thank you so much.
Well done indeed.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Much appreciated. We are in the midst of greatness and, the talent abound here at ANN7. Thanks indeed to Adele Nchabeleng, Transform RSA President, Sfiso Mahlango, Group Political Editor, Professor Andre Duvenage, Political Analyst, joining us via Skype, Mdumiseni Nduli, KZN ANC Provincial Spokesperson on the phone line. And thanks to you at home for watching. Up next is ANC Decides with Mfundo Mabalani. Stay with us.